this is the mum for dipping.
The meat, right?
Yeah. And this is the signature of this place. You couldn't get it anywhere.
Of course, I didn't just want to fall into those typical tourist traps. I only half fell into it. So here are the things I recommend from my own experience, from the local expertise and touristy stuff that you should definitely check out.
So when it comes to my overall trip, I guess I got to do some of like the touristy things, like go visit a museum.
I also had a chance to drop by the Vietnam War Remnants Museum, where, the Vietnam War memorabilia and a homage to the war from the Vietnamese perspective. But I do warn you, it's not for the faint of heart. Things like Agent Orange, children, and other things. But at the same time, I also get to see a bit of my own parents' struggles as they were born during this age. My first stop was in Shin Coffee, right after I landed. When you think of Vietnam and coffee, my non-local brain goes to Café Soda, or Vietnamese drip coffee. But to my surprise, it was a modern Western coffee shop. Things like pour-overs, cold brews, and your lattes. Price range, anywhere from $4 to $5. Because, due to the higher range of coffee and their in-house coffee bean roasting, I would definitely say this is the spot to go and drop by for a quick pause from the Saigon heat. And I'm a little biased because my cousin is a roaster here. The next place that I dropped by was the Jade Emperor Pagoda. Price itself is free, well, unless you have to pay for parking. Built in 1909, locals come here as it is a Buddhist temple. Locals come here to pray, and it's also a big tourist attraction here in Saigon. I also suggest you don't buy things at these tourist traps because everything here is at a foreigner price, meaning it's not really worth it. You can find things here at a much cheaper place, such as, your local alleyway down the street or outside the markets, because here, from souvenirs to food, they try to rip you off a little. And of course, I had to drop by Ben Thanh Market, which is another tourist favorite. Although the prices, I would recommend bargaining since it's a thing to do in Vietnam. You can find things like decent food as well as random souvenirs. And as you can also see, this is quite the popular tourist destination. And the price of cost itself is free unless you buy things. And you ever wondered how modern Vietnam can get? Drop by any of these new malls, whether that's in the Crescent Mall around Phu My Hung, the Takashimaya Mall, Vivo City Mall. It literally felt like I was in Vancouver. I'd argue like some of these malls might even be better than ones in Canada. But I probably wouldn't recommend shopping as, the prices here do get a little aggressive. And if you wanted to go shopping, definitely check out any of the independent boutiques like Jan Shop. But it's definitely a place to see the development of Vietnam.
I'm in the mall right now. That security guy does not look very happy. They even have ramen shops here.
And it's not that expensive.
Ramen, 49,000.
When it comes to actually getting food in places in Vietnam, I would say buyer be warned. Because if you come from anywhere from the Americas, from Australia to the UK, you're probably used to relatively clean food, where in Vietnam, there isn't such thing as food safety. And even my own relatives advise against it. But do try some of the things from your bún bò Huế to your pho and your bun quang, because you can find these around the block and they're relatively safe to eat. After a day of being your typical non-Vietnamese tourist, my cousins and his coworkers decided to take me to Bohème Bui Vien nightclub.
Okay, this is the front desk,
And
where-
before that,
where
we
we're
actually
heading
hit
to
up
Saigon.
a place,
This is a traditional
which was a
Chinese
beer
food
club
in
or a
Vietnam.
pub, which included everything from loud music and 80 cents beer, and you can't go wrong with that. But after that, we actually went to Bohem, which is known as the local place to turn up, and you'll see 90% of the people here are local.
Can you please not have it uploaded on YouTube? Like your channel?
It's too late. Say it again.
Fuck you.
And you get a choice of beer, alcohol, and this large fountain thing of mixed gin and fruit juice was costed about $1 million, which split between 4 people, that's roughly around $10 for a good time and a hazy night. So not bad in my book. And the last 2 things I wanted to see was to drop by the Bitexco Financial Tower, which apparently is Saigon's tallest building, so you can get a good skyline of the city. And you can either do 2 things. One, spend 200,000 dong to the Saigon sky deck, but option 2 is you can pay for overpriced beer for around the same price and get that view. But unfortunately, I wasn't the only one who thought of this, so there was quite a bit of a lineup to see this. But if you're in a hurry, I would definitely drop by to the Saigon sky deck. And the last thing I wanted to do was, since it was just below, was drop by the Pho Di Bo, which is known as the Win Hui walking street. And it's literally right underneath the Bitexco Financial Tower. And that pretty much sums up my trip. And just on a more safer note, it's much more safer to take taxis, but be aware of things like taxi scams as well. And if you had to ride a motorbike, I would use apps like Uber or Grab, and don't use things like Seaom or like your personal motorcycle rider, because that's not that quite safe. And that pretty much sums up my 2 weeks here in Vietnam. A mix of tourist traps and somewhat local things that you should check out when you're in Saigon, with things such as rapid transit being implemented and continuing developing infrastructure. I can only imagine what it'll be like in a couple of years.